Today I'm starting a new scene of the Kern River and the mountains around it. And this is on a 24 by 36 panel. I did the charcoal outline. I'm going to start out a little bit different. I'm going to do the block in first. I'm not going to worry about the values. I'm just going to get sort of the color block in. I'll try to observe values, but I can always fix it later. So let's see what happens. When I use charcoal for the outline, I usually will kind of rub it off. You can still see the lines, but then you're not kind of fighting your paint with the charcoal. I used my usual palette. I mixed some of my colors first, and here's the list. And I occasionally have some visitors to my palette, and this is what I used. This is my initial block-in. So check it out. This is a big canvas, and it's going to take a lot of work. Normally, I would recommend planning your painting before you start, but this time I didn't. And on a 24 by 36 canvas, that meant I had a lot to fix. So I'm starting with the rocks here, as you can see. The sun is coming from the left, and so I wanted to make most of the rocks slightly darker on the right and then put some highlights in on the left. As I started working on value, I realized some other issues had crept in. For one thing, I didn't really plan out my focal point, but the more I worked on the rocks, I thought, well, maybe my rocks are the focal point. I began to think this is probably going to take several days to get this done. Here's the first day's progress. I kind of like how the rocks are turning out. Originally I thought the focal point was going to be right here where the river went behind those trees. But now I feel like maybe that's my focal point. So what I've decided to do, I need to make this area here a little more vague. There's a lot of rocks here, but you really can't paint them all. And I think this needs to be a cooler color. A cooler color, get some more blues in there, something that kind of goes with this area. Anyway, I feel like the shadows on the mountains are a little too dark. So I'm going to work on that today. Let's get started. Closer to finished with the rocks. And now I think it's time to move up this way. The river itself was tricky because brown water and green water is not exactly glamorous, but some movement and reflections helped bring it to life. Sometimes the subject matter teaches you more than you would expect. I'm trying to avoid putting all the detail in because you can't put detail everywhere, and I've got a lot of detail on the rocks. So that's the tricky part. Now I straightened it out, kind of made it vague here. I feel like this looks messy and kind of muddy. Edges are so important. You should make them crisp where you want attention and soft where you want atmosphere. So I need to get the tree in on the side of this mountain. This lower branch was dead and the leaves were dead, so I had a hard time showing that. When I started this painting, I was thinking about showing how you could just block in the color and change the value as you proceed with the painting. And what's happening now is I am thinking about value, but I'm also concerned about edges. So you always want your edges, the edges within a painting to be completely different. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So here in this lower right corner, I've got some different kinds of edges. So if you look here, this is kind of a sharp edge, and some of these other edges here kind of blend into the others. This is a soft edge, soft edge. This is a sharp edge, but this is a soft edge. And so I'm thinking about that in relationship to up here. And I'm also thinking about being a little bit more abstract, not abstract, being a little bit more impressionistic in my paint application here. I feel like this doesn't quite look right, but I'm going to work on it. And then over here in the trees, there's really no edges except for maybe a little bit of the limbs. So we have switched over to the water. What's funny is I'm looking at the painting obviously in person and looking at it on the screen, and the color is just not right. It looks really bright on the screen, and it looks not as bright in person. Let's work on these mountains. Almost done. Because the trees are in the distance, I needed to imply some texture, but also make them a little bluer. And so that's what I'm trying to do here, to make it recede into the distance. And these little crevices need to be darker. There was a lot of back and forth on the mountains. Put the dark in, add some light on top, put some dark over that, kind of back and forth. I was trying to, with brush strokes and color, I was trying to imply the changes in the topography and how the crevices seem to go downward. I also needed to show that there were pine trees in those dark areas, and so I tried to imply the trees with just adding some texture, because you can't paint them specifically because they're so far away. It wouldn't look natural. The bank of the river needed a little definition. There was a lot of shadow, and I had to show there were sunlit trees behind these dark ones in the foreground. So that took a little bit of finagling back and forth. Back to these trees in the center of the painting, I wanted to make them look more vague and kind of in the background. So I thought it might help if I got a little darkness behind them where the limbs are. And I played around with some colors. This is where I thought my original focal point might be, right where the river goes behind these trees. Trying to get the mistletoe in here. And let's take a look. You might notice I brought the sand over a little bit more to the left here in the bottom front. It looked a little weird all by itself just in that one lower right corner. So I think we're done. I feel like I've overworked it in a bunch of spots. I did feel like that needed some dulling, so I added a little darker blue in with that, with the water. Changed the color on the shore there. It's hard to show a picture in a camera because the colors are not accurate, and this is really actually much darker than it appears in the photo. But anyway, so I do believe that the rocks were my focal point. I'm not unhappy with it, but I just might end up tweaking it down the road. I don't know. Anyway, we're finished for now. Anyway, this painting was primarily about focal points, values, and edges, and I hope that you got something out of it. Happy painting!